Welcome to module 21 of database management systems. In this module and the next two, we will discuss about application design and development. In the last week, we have for the whole week in the 5 modules, we have discussed about relational database design in depth. We have looked into what are the different aspects of that, and now we get into the core issue of if I have a relational database design existing and that is populated with the data, then based on that how do we develop, how do we create an application where the user can interact and actually get answers to the questions that the user has, or the user can actually update the data, create new data, remove old data and so on. So, we would in that process like to familiarize with the fundamental notions of notions and technologies of web applications, and specifically we would learn about servlets and Java server pages. So, these are the 3 topics to be covered. So, we first start with application programs and user interfaces. So, the situation is where we do have a relational database design, it is populated with the required data, but how about the interaction with the user? Incidentally, most of the database users do not interact with the database or query the database using language like SQL, because as you have seen, it is not a very friendly language and it is not presentable in a way which we would always expect or we would like. So, usually an application program acts as we say as an intermediary between the user and the database, and it is often split into 3 layers, as we will say, front end, middle layer and back end. So, on the right I have shown these 3 layers, we will talk more about that. This is just a representative diagram. So, the front end is the user interface, it is also called the presentation layer. So, it is the layer where it is a part of the application where there are forms, GUIs and different ways to input as well as get output of the data, which is directly interacting with the user. Then we have a middle layer, or it is also called the business logic layer or the application layer, where the functionality of the application, the required operations of the or desired behavior of the application are coded, and it is kind of acts as a link between the front end and the back end. And what is the back end? Back end is the actual data access layer, or it is where the persistent data, the database that we have created exists. It is typically large in volume, needs efficient access and so on. So, in this module we will try to understand as to how such, what are the different requirements and what are the different technologies involved in creating such a layered application. Now, if we historically look at, so here we are just showing 3 phases. Initially 60s and 70s where the first database application started, then the interaction used to be text based from the terminal, and those used to directly connect to the mainframe computer where the data existed through either a direct connection, dial-up phone or proprietary network. And as we moved to the 80s, then we saw the advent of local area networks. So, application programs or desktop would interact with the database through these local area networks, and beyond that we have the what we call the web era, which is 1990 onwards, when that is about roughly the last 30 years, where typically the applications are now based on web browsers. So, the front end where we actually interact are web browsers, and that connect to the web application server, the database, everything through an internet. And I must tell you at this point that when you say this is the architecture, it does not necessarily mean that the cloud shown as internet will have to be the web. It could be an internet which is created with a set of systems within your organization, which we typically call is an intranet, or couple of organizations across, which we say are extranet, or it could even be a set of systems which are connected through the internet protocol within your lab, or it could even be a single computer in which all these layers are integrated together. But by internet we mean this is a internet protocol and technologies will be used for doing this interaction. So, web interface has become the de facto standard, which gives a very distributed access to the database, enables large number of users to access together, and it avoids the requirement of downloading or installing specialized code into that. All that we need is just a web browser, and we have seen we are living through a variety of applications which are of this kind. The banking applications, the airline and railway reservations, car rental, hotel booking, our web mail systems, we check mail in Gmail or Yahoo. Those are all different web interfaces through which we actually access the required set of databases, and every enterprise operations, the ERP are now web based, and that has become the de facto standard. So, in the web interface, along with the web interface, what has been emerging of late of the last about 10 years are mobile interfaces that we are getting used to using such applications from our mobile phone or tablet, and these are similar in architecture and workflow as of the web application, but there are significant differences too, and at a later point in the next module we will discuss about the specific requirements of mobile apps in this context as well. So, before we move forward in terms of the details of how to build these applications, we need to familiarize ourselves with the basic notions of the web as such. So, we call them as web fundamentals. So, web is a distributed information system which is based on hypertext. Hypertext is one where you have a part of the text available to you, and then you have links, we say are hyperlinks, which can connect to the different documents contents which are located at other places at other servers. And typically most web documents are hypertext documents which are formatted in terms of what we know as HTML, hypertext markup language. You will be familiar with that, I am sure. So, they contain text, and along with that they can have other components like images, video. The text has specifications for font, color, style, all that, and in addition there are forms which can be used to enter data and send them back to the web server. Now, naturally when we operate on the web, we need to have the functionality of pointing to different resources, and this is done by what is known as URL or Uniform Resource Locator. So, that is a URL is a procedure through which you can identify and point to a certain specific location of content. So, here I am showing an example of such a URL. All of you would be familiar with URLs, but just to look into the different components, the first component HTTP:, this HTTP is actually tells us the way the content would be accessed, and this is typically called a protocol. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which allows you different texts to be accessed. The second component in this URL, which is between the two / and the next / www.acm.org, uniquely identifies a machine on the internet. You will understand this is a symbolic name, and the actual machine has what is known as an IP address, and we will not go into those details, but for us it is enough to understand that www.acm.org here is uniquely relatable to a particular machine on the internet. And the last part which is remaining sigmod, and if there are more and more parts, then it identifies the document inside within that machine. So, URL can be used in multiple other ways also. For example, I can use a URL locator to specify a file in my machine. For example, I have shown an example of an AVI file in my C drive in Windows, and that is done through a similar URL where the protocol is not HTTP, the protocol is file, telling me that it is actually residing in my local machine. So, I have shown two ways to look at that, and you will see that between the two forms, if you look at the second form, you can easily understand that the machine to be identified is called the local host, and in the first form that part is missing because it is by default the machine where I am running this code, and rest of it is same, which is basically the identifying the document to be located in that machine. Similarly, this such URL can also, in the last example you can see that www.google.com is the basic machine where I am putting the URL, and then the rest of it is search. So, which actually takes it to a document where I tell the search to be performed, and then there are parameters to this form. The parameter is q is equal to Servlet search, which is equivalent to saying that I am asking google.com to search for contents which have Servlet search in it. So, this is the basic purpose of the uniform resource locator or URL. Incidentally, you may have heard the names like URI and URN in addition to URL. So, they are related, but they mean little bit different things, as this Venn diagram shows. So, a URI can be either a URL or a URN, or it could be both. So, URN functions like a person's name. So, you can conceive it that way, universal resource name, and URL resembles that of a person's street address. So, URN says what is the name of the content, and URL says where that can be found, and URI in general could be either the name or the address or both of them. Usually in this context of our discussion, we will continue to use the term URL only, but I just wanted you to be aware of the other two terms in case you come across them in the text. So, we know by now that HTML provides the formatting, the hypertext links, images and so on, and HTTP provides the protocol through which the contents are exchanged between different machines in the internet. So, you can select from a set of options in terms of HTML, pop-up menus, radio buttons, check boxes and so on. You can enter values through text box, and once a form has been filled up, that form will be sent back to the server from where it came and will be acted upon by the server. HTTP helps in that transfer mechanism. So, here is a sample HTML code. Let me show you the effect of this in the next slide. So, if you look in here, then you can see that this is what is known as a tag, and it kind of the tags are kind of given in the form of parenthesized notation. So, it has a opening and a closing, and these have to actually match, and you can see that the opening is written within the corner brackets, and the closing you write the same tag name, but you put a forward slash before the name. And then between the closing, opening and the closing, you can write more tabs in a nested manner. So, here it says that I have a HTML which has a body, and the body spans this much, and then we are saying that there is a table. So, this is the table that you can get to see, and then it also says that there is a form, and this is a form that you get to see. Within the table you can see, so it is saying that this is an ID, there is a name. So, it is describing the first row, the department. So, you can see each one of them, the ID is here, the name is here, the department is here. Similarly, this is the next row where it is saying it is 00128 Zhang computer science. So, this is how you actually in an HTML in a text form, all these details will be given, and when it is rendered by the web browser, then you will see a table like this. Similarly, here we are I am showing an instance of a form which is used to input data. So, we are saying that here is a drop down, and it is written out here in terms of options. So, the first option student is visible here. If you drop down, you will actually see another option instructor. Here you will not see that because it is a frozen image. So, and then I have a qualifier name, and there is an input text box where you can input any string up to size 20, and once this has been done, then you have a input which is submit, which is the submit button here, which shows that you can now submit, and then this form filled up form will be sent back to the web browser from where it originally came. So, this is the basic mechanism of HTML. You can learn little bit more about that and get familiar with it. So, a document name in a URL may identify a program that is written that generates. So, HTML could be either at the URL in the web server, you can either have a HTML, which we say is a static HTML, or you could actually have a program which when you send the request, it actually, for example, when you are doing Google, you said www.google.com/search $Q is has a value Servlet search, then actually at that location there is no HTML currently existing which contains the search result, but instead there is a program which will be executed based on the submission of this form, and when run that will generate a HTML document, and once that is generated, then this will be passed back to the to your web browser. So, that is the basic mechanism. So, if you want a new service on the web, then all that you simply need to do is to create and install a new program that will provide that service, and through this process we will see how easily this can be done, and how web browser provides a graphical interface to this information service. There has been other mechanisms of doing similar things also, which was particularly popular earlier, called the common gateway interface or CGI, but now we have various other ways of doing the same thing. So, in this context, then the basic 3 layers that we started discussing with are here. So, this is the most common way an application is. So, this is where your front end is, where you have the browser, where you see that this is the network. We are just in general writing network, it could be internet, it could be intranet, and a web server. So, when you send a request, it is received by the web server somehow computes a result HTML, and that is sent back to the browser, and that is how the interaction keeps on happening. So, the browser and the web server together often would be referred to as a front end, because that gives the presentation, that presents the results, the interaction to you. The next is the application layer, which is the business logic where you write, and then you have the data access layer or the database server, and these are the actual disks where the data exists. So, this is tier 1, this is tier 2, and this is tier 3, which is a very typical way a web application will be architected, and these are the 3 layers or 3 tiers that we will usually find. So, often actually 3 is not a very magical number in terms of tiers. It is possible that you could have more, some applications have more tiers, and some applications may choose to have multiple functionality in the same layer. For example, web server and application server functionality could be clubbed together, and when this is done, we say that we then have only 2 layers. So, the front end and the middle layer are merged together, and the back end or the database server becomes a second layer. So, we would often might want to do that. The reason we do that, and I will just take you back to the 3 layer view. So, if the question is naturally, if we have the web server and we have this connection, this is clear. Now, the question is what is this connection and what is this connection? Is it necessary that they will have to be on the same server physically, or will they be on can be on different server and servers could be connected through a LAN, or they themselves could be on different servers over the internet, and they may be connected through internet. So, all of these are possibilities, and the way we connect is the way we will write the application will not depend on the way these servers are connected between each other. We will often assume that as if they are connected over a net, and write it in a way so that even when they may be connected over a LAN, or even when they may actually be on the same machine, the things will work in the same way. Now, one point that should be borne in mind in terms of the HTTP protocol is it is connectionless. So, this is a very critical concept, and it means that once I start the process, I have an URL, I submit that, and that goes to the server runs an application, or it is a static page, server picks up and returns me that HTML. The HTTP loop is closed. So, that is all that happens, and when I submit again something based on that. So, I have gone to gmail mail.google.com, I submit that and I get back a form which tells me to put my user ID and log in. I do that, I submit, and that when that goes, then there is no memory about the earlier interaction that has happened. So, when my login submission goes, it is authenticated in the back end. I am able to log in, and I am given back the first screen of my mailbox, which is the inbox screen, and as soon as I get that inbox, the HTML containing the inbox on my browser, that transaction has also been over. So, if I now want to look at a specific mail, it has to be a new query, and it does not remember anything from the previous query. So, this connectionless property naturally makes it makes certain things more difficult. You will realize that many of the other connections that we do, for example, if we log into Unix system or to a Windows system, if we use some database connections, they are connected till we disconnect them, but in HTTP it is not so. It is connectionless. Every time you do, you have a separate session. So, naturally the question this was, I mean there are reasons of why it is done this way. It is to reduce load on the server and so on, but naturally the consequence is, therefore, we cannot remember information from one request response loop to the next. So, if I have logged in to my Gmail account and I have seen I have got the inbox, then when I want to check my first mail, the system does not know anymore that I am logged in, because that session request response is over, and now I am making a new request that show me the first mail, and I expect to see the whole body. So, there is no information that is carried from one request to the other, which makes HTTP difficult to work with. So, the solution for that is something which is known as a cookie. So, a cookie is a small piece of text which contain information which is identifying, and which can go back and forth between the browser and the server. So, first it is sent by the server to the browser, and what the browser does. So, this happens the first time. So, when we have logged in, my browser has got some cookie from the Gmail server. Then the browser can send it back to the server when it is doing the next request, so that I can be identified as the logged in person. And so, the browser can keep it as locally in its memory or locally here, and that is a part of the HTTP protocol. So, this cookie keeps on going back and forth. So, every time I send a request, the cookie actually has to go to tell the server that yes, this is Parthapratim Das, who is already logged in and authenticated himself for checking his mails. So, cookies are a big convenience, and they are a very important factor of the web applications. So, they can be stored permanently or for a limited period of time. Next, let us look into some of the core technologies that are involved. The first technology is called a servlet. Servlet is nothing but, as you can understand from the name itself, is as we have booklet is a small, very small book. Servlet is a very small server. So, it is a Java application which can do certain tasks. So, it is a kind of an application program, and every time we request, then the server actually spawns a new thread, and in that thread this servlet would be running, and once the request is serviced, that thread will be closed. So, this is a typical servlet view. So, which shows that in the servlet you are actually creating the requested possible HTML response that you would like to have. So, there are different details, you can read through that. So, this is a typical servlet code. So, it actually is a Java code which through print line will generate different lines of the HTML. Now, naturally servlets maintain sessions the way we talked about, so that through an interaction I can continue to be identified, and the servlet can check whether the session is on or the session is already over. So, these are the different ways of doing that in terms of checking the user ID, and several web servers, application servers have support for servlet. Apache Tomcat is one of the very popular ones which you must have heard the name of, and there are several other servers as well. Now, along with the servlet, there is another concept which is called server side scripting. Server side scripting is a mechanism where you define an HTML document, and within that HTML document can be used. So, you may have some inputs to that, and they can be used to directly fire embedded SQL queries. So, we talked about embedding of SQL query while we discussed about the basic mechanism of host language and query language. So, here the HTML kind of a language is the host, and you can embed the query right in as a part of that. And so, that query goes to the database query server, and you get the answer, and that answer is placed where your original query was there, so that you continue to get very easily a complete HTML as a response. So, this kind of a mechanism makes it very easy, because it is quite easy to conceive of the HTML and fill in. So, if I have asked for say logged in to my mail Gmail service, then I have given the input as my username password, and when that gets authenticated, then I get a response which is select mail from different respective tables where my authentication is there, the username is PPD and so on. So, it becomes quite easy to actually create the HTML, and there are several such scripting languages. JSP and PHP are the most popular ones. So, this is how a typical JSP will look like. So, you can see that this actually looks like HTML, but inside that you have some part of a Java code. So, what will happen, the body will get replaced when the response has come. For example, here the response is doing a hello world. So, when this is executed, then whatever is the result will replace the body in the HTML here, and the resultant HTML will get generated. There is another mechanism of scripting which is also very popular, called PHP. So, this is how it is done. Similarly, you can have scripts at the client side also. For example, if you are entering data for say a month and in numeric, and you happen to enter 14, then in most cases the page will immediately give you an error saying that 14 cannot be a valid month. So, there is a validation involved. So, in the client side, in the browser, there are some small scripts that can run. Is most typically it is a JavaScript which can do different authentication, which is possible without actually accessing the data in the database. You cannot, for example, validate a mail data based on the client side scripting sitting on the browser, but you can validate small things like valid data forms, range of data and so on. And it is very important, because if you could not do that, then all you would have required is you would have sent that faulty month numbered 14 to the backend server and got an error, and you would have come back and then had to correct it, but you can do this locally at the browser itself. So, client side scripting has a lot of value, but you will also have to remember that if you are doing client side scripting, then there are security issues, because it is quite possible that if we are doing things on the client side, that is on the browser, then we might also inadvertently or by a malicious intent actually make damages to the machine on which the browser is running. So, there are different kinds of care that is to be taken. For example, Java applet, which is another way of doing client side computation, disallows file writes and so on. And JavaScript, as I have said, is widely used, and it can function to check for input validity, which I gave an example of. It can modify the displayed web page, it can communicate with the web server to fetch data and so on, and you should familiarize yourself with JavaScript more. It is a very powerful mechanism to compute the simple things at the client side. This is an example that I have given. So, you can read through and you will be able to, if you know Java, you will be able to understand JavaScript very easily. You could get through that. And so, there are multiple options of doing such things, but JSP has a unique position, because it is very useful in many contexts. So, I say the JSP has certain USP, like active server page, which is used in terms of the Microsoft platform, is also another mechanism of doing server side scripting, but JSP is better because it is portable. With respect to pure servlets, which we showed you in the beginning, JSP performs is easier to use, because JSP has the structure of the HTML page, whereas in a pure servlet you will have to use print line to print every tag of the HTML, which is cumbersome. JSP in contrast to JavaScript is certainly a different thing, because JavaScript runs on the browser on the client side, JSP runs on the server side, and certainly JSP is compared to static HTML is more powerful, because it can handle dynamic information. So, in this that brings us to the end of this current module. So, what we have done, we have understood the basic requirements of database application programs and user interfaces, understood the basic terminology of the web, and took a look into the core technologies of application development, which is in terms of the servlets and Java server pages.